Hi, I'm Paul Nation. Recently, Rob Waring and I have written a book about extensive reading. And today, I'm going to talk about extensive reading and the closely related activity of speed reading. The most important change or improvement that a teacher could make to a language course is to include an extensive reading program. Extensive reading involves reading lots of material which is at the right level for the learner. Being at the right level means there are only about 1 or 2 words in every 100 running words that might be unfamiliar to the learner. This means that extensive reading programs usually involve graded readers. Graded readers are books which are specially written within controlled vocabulary levels. If you don't know what a graded reader is, then it's really important that you go onto the web, type in graded reader, and find out about them. They are a tremendous resource for learners of English as a foreign language. Without graded readers, we couldn't have extensive reading at the beginning and intermediate stages of language learning. The lowest level graded reader starts at the 75 word level, and at that level there are about 6 or 7 books which are written only using the same 75 words. Graded readers go up in stages of a couple of 100 words or so depending on the series, and there'll be readers at the 200 word level, the 400 word level, 600, 800, 1,000, and so on, up to the 3,000 word level. In extensive reading, learners sit quietly and read for enjoyment and understanding. It's not necessary that they do exercises or activities about what they read. It's important that they do lots of reading which is at the right level for them. The primary requirement of an extensive reading course is that learners are reading material which is at the right level for them. The second requirement for a speed reading course is that they are doing plenty of reading. This is why extensive reading is called extensive reading. Extensive means covering a wide or large area, and so their reading should involve lots of different books. Learners should be reading at the rate of at least a book a week. Some of the books are quite short, but it's really important that learners do a lot of continued reading over several years. The first requirement for extensive reading is having material which is at the right level. This means that there should be a library of graded readers that the learners can choose from. If you are just beginning an extensive reading program, you need to have enough graded readers so that each learner in your class has a book to read, and there should be a few other books which they can then move to once they've read the one that they're reading. The second requirement for a graded reader program is doing plenty of reading, making sure that the reading is truly extensive, and learners should be reading at least a book a week. The third requirement for extensive reading is that there is time to do the reading and encouragement to do the reading. When learners begin to do extensive reading, they should do it in class time. This is to make sure, first of all, that they do the reading, and secondly, to make sure that they know what they should be doing when they do the reading. That is, that they should choose books which are at the right level for them and get on and quietly read them. The fourth requirement for an extensive reading program is to have some kind of monitoring system so that the teacher knows how much each learner has read and that they're actually doing the reading that they're supposed to do. Nowadays, There are electronic extensive reading programs available. One such program is called X-Reading, and you can look it up on the web. In this program, all of the books are in electronic form, and learners can read them using their cell phones, laptops, or computers. Each book is accompanied by a short test, a multiple choice test, and this test keeps a record of what books the learners have read and how well they did in their reading of that book. If learners don't use a program like X-Reading, there is a program called Moodle Reader or M-Reading, where learners can sit tests based on graded readers. So that is, after they've done their extensive reading of a particular book, they can go online and sit a short test on that book and have their results and that recorded. This provides a monitoring system for the teachers and some feedback for the learners. M-Reading or Moodle Reader is actually free. Extensive reading fits into the meaning-focused input strand and should make up about half of the meaning-focused input strand of a course. The other half of the meaning-focused input strand would be extensive listening. Extensive reading should also fit into the fluency development strand. That is the reading section of fluency development. About 1/3 of the time in an extensive reading course should be spent reading very easy graded readers that the learners have already read before. But when they read them for the second or third time, they should try to read them much more quickly than they did the first time. About 2/3 of the time in an extensive reading course should be meaning-focused input, where the learners read books that they haven't read before, but which are at the right level for them. Extensive reading is an individual activity. Each learner reads a different book, and different learners could be reading books at different levels depending on their reading proficiency. There has been a lot of research on extensive reading. The classic study of extensive reading are the book flood studies by Warwick Ellie and his colleagues. In the book flood studies, schoolwork was replaced. About 3/4 of the time for English schoolwork was replaced with extensive reading. For example, in the Fiji book flood study, this is in the islands of Fiji in the Pacific, the learners studied English for about 4 hours a week. 3 of those hours were replaced with extensive reading. At the end of the 8th month year, learners had made the equivalent of about 14 months' progress compared to the learners who sat the ordinary teacher-fronted oral course. They went back a year later and measured the learners again and found that these gains in proficiency across reading, grammar knowledge, writing, and so on, that these gains were still maintained a year later. Extensive reading requires no real teacher skill. The teacher simply has to make books available for the learners to read and encourage the learners to get on with the reading. An extensive reading program is the single most important improvement that a teacher can make to a language learning course, and the research clearly supports this. Speed reading is a way of getting learners to read at a faster rate. The more quickly learners read, the more they are able to read. And so every extensive reading course should include a small speed reading program. A speed reading program works like this. A speed reading course consists of very easy passages followed by questions. When the learners read the passages, they time their reading. Usually it's done as an activity led by the teacher. The teacher says, "Okay, have you got your reading passages? Okay, are you ready? Go." And the learners start reading. They read quietly to themselves. Each learner could be reading a different passage in the course. It doesn't matter. When each learner finishes their reading, they look up, and the teacher should have a timer or should have written minutes and seconds on the board so that the learners can note down how long it took them to do the reading. They make a note of their reading time, and then they turn over the page and answer the questions. While they answer the questions, they don't look back at the text. They just use their memory. The questions are deliberately easy and general so that the learners don't have to struggle to find an answer. When they've finished answering the questions, they get the answer sheet and they mark their own answers. They then convert their reading time to reading speed and put it on a graph. And they then put the number of answers correct on the graph. And so they keep a record of what text they've read, how long it took them to read it, and their comprehension level. They should do this speed reading activity 2 or 3 times a week. Doing it once a week is okay, but it's better if you can do it a couple of times a week at least. By the time they have read about 20 passages like this, each one taking only a few minutes, their reading speed will have increased by at least 50%. The normal reading speed for a native speaker of English is around 250 words per minute. And that's the goal of speed reading courses. Most learners of English at intermediate proficiency level read at speeds which are slower than 100 words per minute, and this is far too slow. The aim of a speed reading course is to get learners reading close to the 250 words per minute speed. Almost every learner doing a speed reading course will make an improvement. In one study, we looked at some learners who didn't seem to make an improvement. Usually when you run a speed reading course, you find that there are 2 or 3 learners who start off reading at less than 100 words per minute, and even after 20 passages, they are still reading at less than 100 words per minute. So we wanted to investigate that. And so the researcher got the learners to begin the speed reading course, and then after they'd read about 4 or 5 passages, she looked to see which learners had not made any increase. And she spoke to each of those learners individually to see what they were doing. Were they translating as they read? Were they reading aloud as they read? Because the speed of speaking is around about 150 words per minute, and we want learners to read faster than that. Now, what happened was a typical example of what's called the experimenter effect. The experimenter effect occurs when you do an experiment, and by doing the experiment, you interfere with the result because you did the experiment. What the researcher found is that each of the learners she talked to then increased their reading speed. And so at the end of the course, there were no learners who were reading at the same speed at which they began the course. So it's clear from this that when you begin a speed reading course, you should look for learners who are not making an increase and then just talk to them, see what they're doing and explain what they should be doing and so on. And I think you will find that then every learner doing a speed reading course will make quite a substantial increase. Some learners double their reading speed during a speed reading course. This sounds terrific, and it is. But if you are reading at 90 words per minute, doubling your reading speed means that you're now reading at 180 words per minute, and that's still rather slow. So speed reading courses are a very important part of an extensive reading program, because if you can read 50 or 100% faster than you did before, you can read 50 or 100% more in the same amount of time. And the more input you get, the more you will have the opportunity to learn the language incidentally. So now let's look at parts of a speed reading course. Here's a passage from a speed reading course. This is written at the 1,000 word level. There are speed reading courses at the 500 word level, the 1,000 word level, the 2,000 word level, the 2,000 plus academic word list level, the 3,000 word level, the 4,000 word level. There are plenty of speed reading courses available. You can find many of them on Sonia Millett's website. There are also books of speed reading courses which are published, which you can use to help develop learners' reading speed. Now, this is a text, it's about 500 words long, and a learner reading this would take anywhere from around about 5 or 6 minutes at the beginning of the course, and at the end of the course they should be reading it in about 2 or 3 minutes. Let's look at the same part of the same text in more detail. So here's a close-up of that text. One thing you'll notice about the text, it's about Fahian. The words in the text are very simple and easy words that learners already know. You don't develop fluency by working with difficult material. You develop fluency by working with really easy material. And that's why speed reading courses are written within a controlled vocabulary. To choose the right speed reading course, you need to test your learners' vocabulary knowledge using the updated vocabulary levels test or the new vocabulary levels test, both of which you can find on my website. And when you know the learner's vocabulary level, you need to choose a speed reading course which is well within their vocabulary knowledge. So you notice then that the text is very easy, because the first requirement of a speed reading course is that it doesn't use words which are unfamiliar to the learners. The second thing to notice is that there are questions. The questions can't be seen while the learners read the text because they're on the other side of the page. One reason for this is so that the learners don't get too worried about the questions and slow down and try and remember everything. The aim of the learner should be to read as quickly as possible. If there are 10 questions following the text, the best score on the comprehension test is 7 out of 10. The reason why 7 out of 10, or perhaps 8 out of 10 is the best score, is because if the learners score 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, they are reading far too slowly. They are trying to get too much information from this kind of text, and they could easily read more quickly. If the learners score 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or less, then they're not comprehending the text well. And there's no point in being fluent if you don't understand what you read. So a good score then is somewhere around 7 or 8 out of 10. And when a teacher looks at learners reading graphs, it's quite useful for the teacher to say, you got 10 out of 10 on the last reading passage. That shows you can easily read much more quickly the next time you read. So try to go faster. If the learner scores 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, the teacher might advise the learner, read the same text again next time and bring up your comprehension score. Or, the next text that you read, don't try to go faster. Don't go slower, but go at the same speed, but make sure that you have reasonable understanding of it. If the learner is always getting a low score in the speed reading, it probably means the materials are too difficult for them, and that learner needs to read materials which are written at a much lower word level. Here is an example of a learner's speed reading graph. You might notice that the graph moves upwards in a rather irregular way, with ups and downs, but the general movement is gradually moving upwards to a faster speed. This is typical of most learners' speed reading graphs. The ups and downs probably represent different degrees of difficulty of the passages, probably also represent what the learner did the night before and how wide awake they are and how motivated they are on that particular day. But you can see that the movement is a gradual improvement in reading speed. A speed reading course is one way of developing reading fluency, and it's a very important part of an extensive reading program. The other way to develop reading fluency is to read really easy graded readers which are much below the learner's current level of proficiency, but to read them quickly. A similar way is to reread books that have been read before, but to read them faster. And it's good to have both a speed reading program and some easy extensive reading as a part of the extensive reading program. An extensive reading program fits mainly into the meaning-focused input strand. About half of the meaning-focused input strand should be extensive reading. Extensive reading also fits into the fluency development strand. And most of the fluency development in reading in the fluency development strand should be easy extensive reading. But it should also include a speed reading program. A speed reading program only takes a few minutes each time, less than 10 minutes. And that should be done about 20 times using 20 different passages so that learners have a chance to increase their reading speed. Extensive reading is a really important part of foreign language learning. It allows the learners to be independent readers, to get on and do the work themselves. When learners do extensive reading well, it can gradually be set as work to be done outside of class. But it is so important that beginning extensive reading should be done in class time to make sure that it's done, to make sure that learners do it, and to make sure that learners get motivated by the success they experience in extensive reading. Let's look at reading in the 4 strands. Reading fits into each of the 4 strands of meaning-focused input, meaning-focused output, language-focused learning, and fluency development. In meaning-focused input, reading involves extensive reading, and half of the meaning-focused input strand should involve extensive reading. The other half involves extensive listening. Reading can also have some relationship to the meaning-focused output strand. Learners can talk about their reading or use their reading in linked skills activities to do speaking and writing, so that what they learn in reading can then be produced in speaking or in writing. Learners can also do book reports on their extensive reading, and these book reports provide an opportunity for meaning-focused output. Book reports, however, should not take time away from extensive reading. It's important that plenty of extensive reading is done. Language-focused learning involves learning to read, so at the very elementary level, recognizing the letters, recognizing words, being able to read aloud, and to do activities like that. They've all fit into the language-focused learning strand. Intensive reading also fits into the language-focused learning strand. Intensive reading involves the teacher and the learner, or the learner alone, working through a difficult text, getting explanation of the difficulties in the text. Language-focused learning for reading can also involve learning words from word cards, because expanding your vocabulary knowledge is a really important way of increasing reading proficiency. Reading passages with comprehension questions is more like language-focused learning than meaning-focused input. In some course books, however, where the texts are really interesting and they are not overburdened with large numbers of unknown words, such reading can also be meaning-focused input. But a lot of the reading which occurs in course books involves fairly deliberate attention to language features, and so largely fits into the language-focused learning strand. Reading is also part of the fluency development strand, where learners try to read faster by doing a speed reading course or by doing easy extensive reading. So in all the four strands, we can see reading playing some kind of role, making up about a quarter of the fluency development strand, making up about a half of the meaning-focused input strand, making up about maybe a quarter or a third of the language-focused learning strand with intensive reading, deliberate vocabulary learning, learning strategies such as dictionary use and so on, which are relevant to reading. And reading can make up a small part of the meaning-focused output strand in that it can provide input for activities which involve speaking or writing, which are based on the same topic.